Too long, but this was just an interesting study of using phenytoin, which is a treatment for epilepsy, that stabilizes nerve cells, essentially, by acting on sodium channels. And it may be that it acts in a not dissimilar way to Vampira, which appears to sort of stabilize nerves and makes damaged nerves more effective. That's why it seems to improve walking. But phenytoin was used in a trial of acute optic neuritis. So this is acute visual failure as part of someone presenting with MS, treated with phenytoin from within 2 weeks, and looking at the thickness of the retinal nerve fiber layer in the back of the eye at 6 months. So actually trying to measure how much damage has been done. And the bottom line is there was significantly less damage done in the people who were treated with phenytoin, suggesting that phenytoin acted to preserve neurons during acute neuritis, optic neuritis. So this is a potentially interesting treatment for acute disease, but it then also raises the issue, could this be a useful therapy for protecting neurons in general in MS? So this may be another line of treatment for progressive forms of MS. Unfortunately, there was another drug, lamotrigine, which also has an effect on sodium channels, and there was actually a formal trial undertaken with that in progressive disease, which showed no benefit, unfortunately. But again, phenytoin is a very old, very cheap drug, so whether or not people are going to be interested in doing a large-scale trial, we'll wait and see, but people are certainly talking about it. And then finally, vitamin D. People in New Zealand need no reminding of the importance of vitamin D, and certainly lots of work has been done across both Australia and New Zealand of the importance of vitamin D in MS. So I'm very pleased to say that thanks to the support from the MS Research Australia, we've actually been able to set up a trial looking at vitamin D in people presenting with their first episode of symptoms with MS. And we've so far recruited 60 patients out of a total of 240 that we would like to recruit for this trial. And hopefully this will give us an answer as to whether or not taking vitamin D makes a difference or not. So our conclusions are that treatment should certainly be offered early on in MS. And that treatment needs to be tailored to what we think their likely severity of disease is going to be. And that's sometimes easy, sometimes not so easy. Again, I think it's a very individual patient-based decision, weighing the potential benefits against the risks, and everyone varies as to what risk, and also I think what your sort of long-term aims are. And that all needs to be discussed very openly before commencing on any therapy. If people on therapy get new disease activity, then certainly you need to look at escalating the therapy. I think brain atrophy is likely to become a useful measure in the future, and it's clearly what we want to try and avoid, but in practice, getting measures of that are difficult. And we need more long-term outcome data, and I think that's only going to come from these real-world databases like MSBase in the future, because 10-year trials are just too expensive to run. And so those are all the people involved in the review, and as you'll see, a lot of them are from New Zealand. But thank you very much for your time. Yeah, look, it's clearly a factor. There's no doubt about that. The issue is, does taking vitamin D make any difference? And the bottom line, we will only find that out from doing a trial. So we're very keen and interested to find out what the results of this are, because taking vitamin D appears to be very safe, but it's not completely risk-free, and certainly in Queensland, where renal stones, kidney stones are relatively common, and vitamin D can increase the risk of that. So it's not totally risk-free, but it is true. I mean, there have been lots of studies around the world taking very high doses of vitamin D that have suggested it's safe. So there's little downside, and certainly my recommendation to anyone with established MS is to take vitamin D, and certainly to get their vitamin D level up to around about 100. But the bottom line is I've got no evidence to support that whether it makes any difference, and again, it's not expensive, but it's not free either. So I think you've always got to have the evidence. There's lots of things that have been done in medicine over the years that have subsequently been found to have no scientific basis at all, sadly, even though they were seemingly based on very good logic.
Yeah, how can the blood-brain barrier be modulated?
In theory, yes. And the whole issue of what it is about the blood-brain barrier, what circumstances is it broken down to allow these inflammatory cells into the brain? Because normally that does not happen. And why is it so focal and why is it random in the brain? There's a lot of unanswered questions there, but certainly therapies that were aimed at sort of preventing that breakdown would be potentially very worthwhile. Now, I guess ultimately natalizumab has done the same thing, although it's not acted on the blood-brain barrier specifically. It's the sort of part of the physiological or functional blood-brain barrier of simply stopping them getting out of the blood vessel into the brain has, proven to be a very, very effective treatment.
Thank you, Simon. We've been privileged today to hear an address by a leading researcher in Australasia, and you can hardly fail to be impressed at the amount of research that Simon has done for the talk this morning. I know there will be other questions. We have two expert neurologists speaking later in the morning and early this afternoon, and I have no doubt that Ernie and Wallace will be able to answer some of those questions that might have come. But in the meantime, thank you very much, Simon. Safe trip back to the Gold Coast, and thank you very much for your contribution this morning.